Okay, thank you so much. Anand Bihari Prabhu, dear Bhakti Center devotees, whether you're in New York or you're anywhere around the world, I'm really grateful that you're here, that we can be part of Srimad Bhagavatam class today and dive into the scripture. So we'll go straight into it. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantamirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Vanchakalpa Trubhascha Kripa Sindhubevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So it's really nice to be with all of you at the feet of Radha Muralidhar and Shri Gaurachandra, Nrsingadev, Shil Prabhupada, and all the devotees. I'm always grateful that I'm still allowed to be here. You know, every time I go to the Bhakti Center, I was just there on Thursday, and I always feel so grateful to still be allowed. You know, despite all my shortcomings that I have. So I'm grateful to be with all of you as well here today. So we'll go straight into the verses. We're reading from 10th canto, the 48th chapter, and verses 31 to 35. The chapter is entitled Krishna Pleases His Devotees. And actually, we'll be wrapping up the chapter. So these are the last about 5 verses in the chapter we'll be reading together.
And 36 too, right?
Okay, yes, 36 as well. Thank you. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Hopefully you can. Okay, so I'll read the translation. My Sanskrit's not so good, so please forgive me. 10:48:31 translation. No one can deny that there are holy places with sacred rivers, or that the demigods appear in deity forms made of earth and stone. This is Krishna speaking. But these purify the soul only after a long time, whereas a saintly person's purify just by being seen. I'll read that one more time. No one can deny that there are holy places with sacred rivers, or that the demigods appear in deity forms made of earth and stone, but these purify the soul only after a long time, whereas saintly persons purify just by being seen. Just for context, Krishna is speaking to Akrura at this point and is glorifying him. Okay, verse 32. Translation, you are indeed the best of our friends, Akrura. So please go to Hastinapur and, as the well-wisher of the Pandavas, find out how they are doing. You're indeed the best of our friends, so please go to Hastinapur and, as the well-wisher of the Pandavas, find out how they're doing. Purport. In Sanskrit, the imperative you go may be rendered by gachasva or gacha. In the second of these cases, the word following gacha, namely sva, is taken in the vocative sense, indicates Krishna addressing Akrura as our own. This is in reference to Lord Krishna's intimate relationship with his uncle. We'll talk about this also as well. Now, verse 33, translation. We have heard that when their father passed away, the young Pandavas were brought with their anguished mother to the capital city by King Dhritarashtra, and that they are now living there. Indeed, weak-minded Dhritarashtra, the son of Ambika, has come under the control of his wicked sons, and therefore that blind king is not treating his brother's sons fairly. Go and see whether the Dhritarashtra is acting properly or not. When we find out, we will make the necessary arrangements to help our dear friends. Shukadeva Goswami continued, thus fully instructing Akrura, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, then returned to his residence, accompanied by Lord Shankarshan and Uddhava. Thus ends the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 48th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Krishna Pleases His Devotees. Okay, so we'll just go through these verses 31 to 36. So there's a few points that I wanted to just make in this from sort of each verse, each translation that came to my heart as I was reading it, and I'll just pull up my notes. Don't bear with me for a second. There's a couple wonderful points. So in this section, where we are right now in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna's he's killed Kamsa, right? And he's taken care of that. He's left Vrindavan. And Uddhava has gone to Vrindavan, has come back, and on Krishna's orders, and spent some time, with the Vrajvasis. And then here Krishna is in Mathura, and we can see that Krishna is, there's a couple of different pastimes that are occurring. Krishna pleasing his devotees, and here he's glorifying Akrura, and then he's asking him to check on the Pandavas. And one of the things I was mentioning when I maybe it was a couple months ago when I'd come and giving classes, that Krishna is shifting his so he comes from Vrindavan where he's in these pastimes, right, with the devotees there. And when he comes to Mathura, when he leaves Vrindavan, he's sort of shifting his focus in some ways. Obviously, Krishna doesn't change, but then he also in his mission, it changes a little bit, because he goes from the pastimes of Vrindavan to focusing on establishing Dharma. We see in the Mathura pastimes and killing Kamsa, and then also in the Dwarka pastimes and the Mahabharata, which we're starting to get a vision into, right? With these verses where Krishna is concerned about the Pandavas, and he's thinking about them, who are his family members. And so you can see he's beginning to think about establishing Dharma more and more, and what is adharmic, what's happening that's adharmic or against the Dharma. And so we can see the shift here. So just for context, that where we are. And he's requesting Akrura to go to Hastinapur to investigate the situation there. The first point that I wanted to make, and I'll just share five principles, you could say, from what I gathered from these verses. And the first is from the first verse. And then we'll just open it up for any questions, any comments. And by the way, if anyone has any thoughts, you can also jump in and write into chat, and we can read them out, or you can save them for the end. I think for those of you who are familiar with my style, I love the collaboration, the engagement from everyone in the room. I think there's so many different realizations that everyone has, so I appreciate that. The first point that I wanted to make was around the power of sadhu sangha and the power of association. This is a point that's been made so much in our tradition, in many traditions, but it's so important, and I think it needs to be continuously talked about and realized at deeper and deeper levels. We can see here the first verse that Krishna, when he's speaking to Akrura, he's mentioning that no one can deny that the holy places with sacred rivers, for example, even in India particularly, there's so many different sacred rivers, from the Yamuna to the Ganga, right? So many different smaller rivers as well, that are there, or the demigods that appear in deity forms made of earth and stone. But these purify the soul only after a long time, whereas saintly persons purify just by being seen. Just by being seen. This is an important point, because this really stresses the importance of getting the right association. Getting the right association. I've said this before, but there's actually a nice quote by I believe is a leadership coach, Jim Rohn. He mentions that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, or the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So think about who are you spending time with, right? Because that influences us greatly, in fact, impacts us greatly. And when we get to spend time with pure souls who are pure-hearted, who have developed love for Krishna, who have developed love, and in turn, with that love for Krishna, have this compassion for the rest of the world, this love for every single soul that is part and parcel of Krishna, we start to understand what that really means at a deeper level. And we can start to actually imbibe that mood in our own life, right? There's many different examples that are given in scripture and in our texts around association. The one that came to my mind as I was reflecting on this yesterday was the example of Jagai and Madai, right? We have Nityananda Dwaradashi coming around the corner in February next month, and I was thinking of how, for those of you who are not familiar, Jagai and Madai were actually very they were born into very good families, if you will. They were born into Brahmana families, which are like the topmost caste in the Indian, in the Vedic structure, you could say. And so they had every opportunity to become devotees, to become spiritualists, from birth, practically speaking. But they fell into really bad association. They started hanging out with the wrong crowd, as they would say, right, in the West. And that affected them to where they became drunkards, they became rapists, they became very they would assault people, steal. They became very demoniac in many ways. And sometimes we portray them as like, even sometimes in our dramas, we kind of portray them in a funny way. Jagat and Madai was like a little bit more comical. But from what I've read and what I've heard from different devotees, it's explained that they were actually, it was actually very serious. They were very scary because they had developed these qualities in such a strong way that it was terrorizing the town and many towns actually, right? So this is an example, but then we also see the flip side of it, that even through the association, even through actually assaulting Lord Nityananda, which was an egregious offense, actually. But even through that association and through the mercy of a devotee, and in this case, Lord Nityananda, who is Lord Balaram himself, Adi Guru, they were able to be transformed, actually. And we kind of hear the story stop there. They actually went to go on to become incredible devotees of the Lord. So you can see that example of Jagai and Madai, that just because you're born into a great situation, association, right, nature and nurture, as they say, can change very much, especially what you nurture yourself with, association that you carry. And then also that working on the flip side, that when we get to interact with devotees who are pure-hearted, that can also really affect us. And we're also lucky in Kali Yuga. There's sort of a special mercy, right? When we talk about the power of association, it's sometimes hard to find association, the right association. But in Kali Yuga, we're given the opportunity, no matter where we're from, whether we're from, a great upbringing environment, or we're from a harder one, or we're from this group or from that group, from this country, from that country, whatever the case might be, especially in Mahaprabhu's movement and his mood, is that everyone is eligible. Everyone is allowed to progress in spiritual life and be part of the Sangha. And I was just in India in November for Kartik, and I was just thinking that how lucky we are actually to all be here. I would spend some time in Vrindavan Dham, and I also spent some time in Jagannath Puri, for those of you who are familiar. And in Jagannath Puri, it's actually quite strict, that for the main temple, unfortunately, some people from certain backgrounds can't actually come into the temple. It's a very strict policy, and not that I agree with it. But I was thinking that how beautiful is it that even though that's there, Jagannath comes out every year to see everyone else, right? To see everyone, to give darshan to everyone. And so that's beautiful. And then through the grace of the different devotees of Krishna, like Srila Prabhupada, even in Vrindavan, Vrindavan is a very sacred place, right? We can't just enter into the Dham. We have to be allowed to enter into a sacred place, right? A sacred, holy place. Um, but we can see how Srila Prabhupada has brought Vrindavan to the West. And when I was just sitting in the Kirtan at Bhakti Center on Thursday, and I was feeling grateful that we could be in New York City and in this community, even here today, and be partaking in Kirtan together and partaking in something so sacred that many people don't get access to it or aren't aware of it or aren't in touch with it. But we have an opportunity to be in touch with it, here of all places, right? In New York City. And so it's easy to take for granted. It's easy to take for granted, but the point that I wanted to make is that in Kali Yuga, we have this special mercy of things are simplified, and we have an opportunity to connect through the mercy of Krishna and his devotees. We have an opportunity to connect. Sort of in previous yugas, you kind of had to be vetted a little bit, right? There was higher standards in some ways, but those kept some certain people, kind of out in some ways from the opportunity to progress in this way. It's very simple. And then the other point that I wanted to make when it comes to sadhu sangha is that why is it important to have sadhu sangha? Why is it important to have gurus, to have mentors that we can learn from? And there's many reasons for that. But one of the things I was thinking is that it it's important to see how these qualities are embodied by others. So when we talk about humility, when we talk about purity, when we talk about bhakti or devotional service, we talk about surrender, um, sharanagati. We talk about the limbs of dharma, right? Truthfulness, cleanliness, um, ahimsa, nonviolence, all of those things. How do we see those practice in this world? Right? This world is a very interesting place. The way we apply these principles, um, it takes a certain art and skill, right? We can see even in the Mahabharata, it's a very, very ghastly situation if you think about it. The Mahabharata is a war that occurs, and so we can think, okay, is war part of spiritual life? How do we apply these principles, right? And so what I was thinking is that through the association of different devotees, we can understand when someone has embodied humility, we can understand what that looks like, and then we can start to apply it in our own life. Um, we can't learn these things from a book, you know. We can read about them, we can read about characteristics, but we have to see them through relationship to others and then start to apply them. We can see purity, we can see devotional service, we can see love for Krishna, we can see compassion for all living beings. When we see that, then we can start to slowly apply it by almost mimicking in some ways, not to imitate, but to take inspiration from other devotees. And that's really why that's important. Um, I was thinking that it was remember when I was growing up, I love mridanga very much, the mridanga drum, and I played since I was a child, probably about 5, 6 years old. And growing up, we didn't have YouTube. And I'm probably quite a bit younger than some on the call, but we didn't have YouTube or Skype or these different tools. And I was remembering that, when I was a kid, my one of my teachers in Mridanga lives in India in Vrindavan at the time. And I had asked him to teach me, but I didn't have that much time to learn from him in person. He was very busy. And I was born and brought up in the West, in New York, New Jersey, and so we had to come back eventually. And he gave me a book of Mridanga mantras, of teachings, and we went through it, and we were able to learn some of it, but some of the things we weren't able to learn because it's like we have this manual, but you need a teacher to guide you right through it. And so this is the point of sadhu sangha, that we have someone that can show us the way, not just give us instruction, not just we can have the instructions from our book, but we can also see the embodied teacher that's there. And the last point I want to make on this point here around sadhu sangha is that sometimes we think that we can only associate with people that are here in person, that are available to us. And it's easy to think in that way that, I don't really have any good, like maybe we're in a part of the world that we don't have amazing sangha, or there's not many devotees or people that are like-minded to us, and we feel isolated. And that's there, and that can be challenging. And also one thing I would encourage everyone to think about is how can we can also associate with devotees in sound form and with people that are not even here physically. Right? We can listen to lectures. Yeah, we're grateful for Zoom. Thank you, Michelle, for this. Yeah, we can tune in from all over the world, even if we're not physically in New York. And right now, I'm not physically at the Bhakti Center, but I'm still able to partake in this discussion. And so even, being able to listen to Srila Prabhupada, being able to listen to devotees who've even passed away, that inspire us, that uplift us, that nourish our soul. Those are all important aspects of it. So we don't have to limit our sadhu sangha just to devotees that we're able to physically see. That's wonderful, and that should be always pursued. But sometimes we might have to also look in other directions and receive what's also available there too. Okay, so that's point number one, the importance of sadhu sangha. The point number two I wanted to bring up was that so there's the second verse, I believe, or the third verse that we read. Krishna, the purport mentions that Krishna uses the word gachasva, which is to indicate that Akrura is one of his own. And I was thinking that how beautiful is how Krishna speaks in such a pleasing way, right? It's mentioned in the Gita that words that are pleasing, that are beneficial, that are truthful, those are in the mode of goodness. That's actual real austerity of speech. And I was thinking that actually the second point that I want to make, the spiritual life is inclusive, not exclusive. Spiritual life is inclusive, not exclusive. Sometimes we can all get into this mindset. I know I have sometimes had this mindset at different points where we think that, this is my service. That's, I do this and I don't do that. Or, I'm very good at this and these other people are not so good at this. Or, my God family are my devotee friend, my community, and then these devotees are not. Or we think we're better than others sometimes, that we're very expert in a certain skill and everyone else is not so good at that. And so this is sometimes the mindset, but I was thinking how Krishna is speaking in such an inclusive way that he's not he's saying like you're like our own family, and Akrura is actually, but he's saying that, and he's speaking in such an inclusive way to uplift other people. All right, he's not like he's a supreme personality of Godhead. Krishna could just demand and say, Krura, go to Hastinapur at once, right? You must do this. But he's requesting him so kindly with a certain etiquette, with a certain inclusion. And I was thinking that we can keep that in mind in our interactions with devotees as well, that we should be inclusive. Sometimes we get this, even when sometimes we get inspired in devotional life, we can start to think we're better than others, or better than people who are not on this path, or in our community, or in our lineage, or parampara. Like it can go in our temple, right? Whatever the case might be, it can go. There's always this other phenomenon that can occur, that we think the other is less than, right? Whether it's other religions, other paths, other faiths. But that's not real Krishna consciousness. It's not real Krishna consciousness. We can see here Krishna is being very inclusive. So we should try our best to always be as inclusive as possible. That doesn't mean that we don't have discrimination or discernment. Of course, we always keep that, but we should also be inclusive as much as possible. Okay, point number 3. Is everyone following so far? Is that okay? Oh, is that okay? Okay, good. All right. Point number 3 is spiritual life is practical, not just intellectual. We can see here that Krishna is very concerned about the Pandavas. He's very concerned. Um, and this is we can really show our care. Krishna shows his care through his interactions with the devotees. And we can also show our care for Krishna through the interactions that we have with him. Um, I think it's said, Srila Prabhupada has mentioned this wonderful that quote that's there that attention to detail is a symptom of love. Attention to detail. Um, and this also applies to our interactions with other devotees as well. Sometimes we might get into this um, a little bit more like, I don't want to say impersonal, but sometimes we get into this mindset where we have our devotional life, we have our service, we have our relationship with Krishna, but sometimes we can become a little hardened to the experience of others in our community. But it's really important that we can show others how much we care by showing up for them as well, right? So we can't just love Krishna in a silo or in isolation, but it's important that we're also loving and appreciating those that are around us, as we just talked about. I was actually just seeing a couple of days ago on social media. There's wonderful Adi Purush Prabhu. I think his team, Interfaith New York City, posted a wonderful video around how it's very cold. It's been snowing. It's been very cold in New York in this area the last few weeks. And the caption of the video was, regardless of your politics, everyone deserves a warm meal on a freezing day. Right? Regardless of your politics, everyone deserves a warm meal on a freezing day. And I thought
A
that was so
warm
nice
prasadam
because
meal.
a prashadam meal. Yeah. Yeah. In this case, prashadam meal, of course. And so, but it's so nice because we can show our care to others, show our care for Krishna by showing care to others. And Krishna does this, not just intellectual, we have this philosophy, but we've got to try to live it in our interactions with each other. And Krishna is showing that in his interactions. He's concerned about the Pandavas, even though they're, many, many, many miles away. And this brings me to point number 4, which is Krishna is always our well-wisher. There's a word that's used repetitively throughout some of these verses, and actually it's in many different places in the Gita as well. Suhirdam, which means well-wisher. And it also comes up in the Gita in the 5th chapter, 29th verse. Bhoktaram yagyatapsam sarvaloka maheswaram suhirdam sarva bhutanam gyatvam mam shantim rachati. And I was thinking that, the fourth point is that Krishna is always there as our well-wisher. He's always there as our wisher. Um, and often we can sometimes we are wondering, is Krishna really there for us? Is he not? Krishna is always sensitive to what's going on in our heart. And in this case, he actually sends his devotees. We can see that Krura is asked to come to Hastinapur to see what's going on. And I was thinking that actually we can feel Krishna's presence in our life in the same way. Sometimes we wonder if Krishna is there, if he's, supporting us, through the challenges of life. And often we can look around and see who's in our life that Krishna has sent, and we can be grateful for that, right? Whether it's people that are uplifting us, that are circumstances, our communities, our teachers, all of those things are things that Krishna is actually sending our way to help support us, in our growth. Just like he's sending Akrura to check in on the Pandavas in this case, right? And we can see also how much he trusts Akrura by sending him, right? This is a very sensitive mission because we have, the uncle, Dhrashtra, the king, who is weak-minded, as Krishna says, and is very unfair. He's not treating the Pandavas fairly, as mentioned in one of the translations. And so he's coming into this family conflict that's occurring, that's starting to really splinter the group. And the Pandavas are trying their best, of course, as we know, to keep things together and be respectful to the Dhrashtra. But then things come to a head. So you can see how much he trusts Akrura to go on this sensitive mission. And he even trusts him. Krishna sending him kind of as his representative, very much so. And the other bit of this is also, can we see the bad circumstances is also Krishna's grace, right? So Krishna is always there as our well wisher, but sometimes that also means that sometimes the harder challenges in our life are also things that Krishna wants us to learn from, right? So it's not always the good things. We can also take, obviously, the good things are there, the positives, but sometimes we go through challenging circumstances, often actually. But sometimes those are very much opportunities for us to take lessons from what Krishna wants us to learn. Sometimes people think, Arjuna was Krishna's best friend, or the Pandavas were wonderful devotees of Krishna. Why did they go through so much, trial and tribulation and grief, in the Mahabharata? It's actually very intense. It's not like, it's not like they're in bliss the whole time. Their lives are at stake, their families are at stake, their kingdoms at stake. They're being humiliated. They're being, plotted against and schemed against, and in all sorts of really very bad ways, very deceitful ways by Duryodhan and the Kauravas. But it's not that Krishna takes away sometimes all the challenges. It's that he's always there throughout the challenges. He's always there throughout the challenges. If we can turn to him, we can turn to him and see where he's there, how he's supporting us, and then what lessons we're meant to learn in some of the challenges as well. Those are important. And I was thinking of even just this last, 4 years with COVID and coronavirus even. There are many challenges. So many people around the world went through so many challenges. And my wife and I were living in New York at that time, near the Bhakti Center actually, during this coronavirus period when it came in March 2020. And I was thinking that actually it was such a challenging time for so many. Especially in the cities, you can see there's so many people. It's not really built to handle something like a pandemic, very, very scary and dangerous times. But we can see looking back that although there's so many challenges for so many families, there were some blessings that also came out of it, right? For example, we can see many people taking the spiritual life seriously, asking questions that they were always thinking about, but never had the opportunity to ask, or the circumstance to ask, that they were pushed to do so. We can even see this community expanding from just the Bhakti Center physically, but people are dialing in and joining in from all over the world, right? And Bihari Prabhu, and able to partake in some of the classes and the discussions and the groups and the offerings that the community is offering. And so, and the list goes on and on. I mean, many people have had many realizations that I've had in conversations and speaking with people that people have shared, that while that time was extremely challenging, there's so many valuable gems and lessons that they learned from that time. And so when I say Krishna is our well-wisher, it doesn't always look like Krishna is going to make everything smooth and rosy for us, but that he's always there throughout those challenges. And lastly, my last point, and as Anand Bihari Prabhu knows, I'm a leadership coach by vocation. That's what I do. And so I have to make this last point, but yeah, this point number 5 is the need for true leadership development. Actually, it's necessary even in our devotional communities, because leadership affects. This is a little bit of like a side point, but this is an important point. I felt like in this verse is alluding to the leadership crisis in Hastinapur, right? Krishna mentions that the Dhritarashtra is weak-minded, and we can see that it's very interesting. It's metaphorical, that the Dhritarashtra is blind. Physically, he's blind, cannot see, but his biggest issue is that he's blind in vision, right? He's ignorant. He's weak-minded, as Krishna says, and he has this he has an over-attachment to his sons, to his family. And unfortunately, his sons like Duryodhan, Dushasana, and etc. are pretty wicked-minded, right? They're quite evil. And so that's that's his issue. And so in his attachment, he's unable to be fair or dharmic. Part of dharma is being fair, being just to his nephews, which are the Pandavas. And so we can see that wherever there's a leadership crisis, you have Dhritarashtra here, who's the king. Actually, Pandu was the king, but then he obviously passes away. He's cursed and whatnot. There's a whole story behind that. The Dhritarashtra becomes the king. He's blind physically. He's blind spiritually, right? We as we just talked about. Um, and his lack of leadership creates a leadership crisis where Duryodhan and his brothers want to push their agenda of pushing the Pandavas out of the lineage of the throne. And this is a real life kind of Game of Thrones, right, if you will. And they want to actually kill them. They want to eliminate them. They want to kind of remove. They're feeling such envy and jealousy and hatred for their own cousins that they want to remove them, which is Yudhishthira, Arjuna, Bhima, the Pandavas. And we can see that whenever, even in the corporate world, in the secular world, whenever there's a leadership crisis, the outside consultants are brought in, right? They bring the consultants in. They bring me in sometimes, or the coaches, right? And we can see here in this case, they have the best coach, the best consultant, which is Krishna, and he's part of the family of the cousin of Arjun, and so Krishna is guiding and mentoring them, and on one side, and then on the other side, you have Shakuni, who is the uncle of Duryodhan, who is the brother of Gandhari, who's Dhritarashtra's wife. He is guiding them. And we can see that the way Shakuni leads is creating this issue, which is he's poisoning people's minds, and he's leading through deceit, hatred, vengeance, and he's creating that mindset in Duryodhan and the Kauravas. And the way Krishna leads is through compassion, um, is through love, and he's pacifying people's minds, right? So dharmic leadership is actually pacifying and peaceful. That doesn't mean that there isn't sometimes challenges to deal with, but it's pacifying versus we can see this leadership that's our dharmic is actually poisoning. It's very poisonous. And this is sort of a foreboding to the situation that ends up occurring in the Mahabharata, where eventually this becomes a great war and a battle where many are killed. And so Krishna is already concerned. You can see Krishna's vision that, okay, there's no leader, there's no real leader there, right? There's no real dharmic leader, unfortunately, that's keeping the situation fair, just, and in the right mindset and right mood. So we need to address that. And so he's saying, okay, what do we have to do? Let's find out about the situation. And then if it's not so good, because he already knows, Krishna already knows this. He already knows that the situation there is not so good, that we have to get involved and protect the Pandavas. So you can see his concern. It's very practical. But this need for real leadership development is important, not just in the Mahabharata we can see, but in our communities, in our temples. We need to have proper leadership. We need to have dharmic leadership. We need to be building the right leadership, because leadership sets the tone that can really allow people to feel protected, to feel empowered, to feel all those things, to feel developed, to feel safe, whether it's physically, emotionally, or spiritually. Those things are all very necessary for spiritual life. So I want to end there and thank everyone. Those are the 5 points that I wanted to make. The first was importance of sadhu sangha. We saw what Krishna mentioned to Akrura and really glorifying him, right? The power of sadhu sangha. Then we talked about how Krishna used an inclusive language. He used inclusive language when he was speaking to Akrura and asking him and requesting him to go. So spiritual life is inclusive, not exclusive. Point 3 was that spiritual life is practical, not just intellectual. So you can see how much Krishna cares, right? It's not just that we have this philosophy, but we don't show our care to others. We just show our care to Krishna. That's not real consciousness. Then point number 4 was that Krishna is always there. We talked about this word suhridam, as our topmost well-wisher, and also Guru and our community, our devotee community, are our well-wishers as well. And then we talked about this last point around the need for true leadership development, where we have Krishna. He's coming in as a guide, as a mentor, as a consultant, and trying to help. this leadership crisis in the Kaurava dynasty, the Kuru dynasty. And then you have Shakuni, who's also trying to help as the uncle, but he's very poisonous. And so it's creating more of a toxic environment there. So I want to end there and thank everyone for their participation. And we'll open up for any questions, comments, and concerns.
Thank you, Anuj Prabhu. Great class. Jamuna Jaya has her hand up.
Hey, Krishna Anuj.
Hey, Ba.
Well, thank
see
you
you.
as always. I get so excited when you give class. It's so wonderful. Thank you. You're like reading my mind on so many different points you said today. But the thing that just really hit home the most was that last thing about leadership. And I was reading a lot this week just about kindness. And His Holiness Ranaswami in the book The Journey Within gives that gold star definition of bhakti in early in the text. I can't remember what chapter, but he says is that bhakti is love for God and service to others and this kindness to others. And I was thinking that's what a true leader is. And Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, what great men do, others follow. And I was thinking each of us is a leader in the way that we treat other people, as you said, the way Krishna treats people and seeing people. And that tied into my mind, which you were pointing out, the great service of Adi Purusha, like every day, like getting out there, that's leadership. And we all have the opportunity to be leaders. And as I read somewhere, we can't point our fingers at leaders if we're not being good leaders in our own little sphere of influence. Because who are leaders, but they're us that get elevated. So I was just really like resonating that point. I can't point my finger at leaders if they're not doing the job, if I myself am not doing it. And that very simple thing of kindness. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a great point. Sometimes we think even in the corporate world or the secular world, there's like leading without a title is really important. And it's a kind of a whole movement behind that. But sometimes we feel, like you said, okay, leaders aren't doing what they have to do. But we're all leaders because leadership is really just influence. It's like every interaction is leadership, right? I think Radhanath Swami has said this. I've heard him say that he's quoted someone else saying that at every moment we should be preaching, and once in a while we say something, right? And it's
that's Saint Francis.
Saint Francis.
Yeah.
Our example, our interactions are actually our greatest preaching effort and our greatest leadership effort. So thank you for that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Damodar Priya.
Hi, Krishna, dear
Hello.
Nishu.
Hello.
Always love having your class as well,
Good to see you.
especially because you're always very practical as to how you go about sharing everything. You know, you still have the Shastric references, but you bring the practicality into it. And just to reflect back, what I really heard today that impacted my heart is the importance of association and helping us see how others embody qualities such as compassion, humility, love for Krishna. I had not heard that before. So I really appreciate that just reminder of why we want association and why we want the correct association, to associate with bhakti practitioners who are embodying those qualities so that we can see what that looks like. And then we can hopefully osmosis, but also through practice, kind of take that on and hope to bring that into our own lives. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. I appreciate this Sangha. I'm so grateful that a silver lining from the pandemic has been the Srimad Bhagavatam classes in the Bhakti Center being on Zoom, and that even once the quote unquote, it's all over the pandemic, that we're still continuing to do that, because I don't know what I would do in my life without this association every day. Like I really, really just, it's like a lifeline. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. That's a wonderful, wonderful point. And it's so true. Like we can even see it in our own association, and just like even kind of in a more like non-spiritual context, even let's just say. But if we're around someone who's like very negative, and like often we'll find that we'll like start to be a little bit more negative, or I've even found if someone's using a certain phrase a lot that I'm around, I might find myself using that phrase, right? We kind of end up doing that. We're like, wait, where did that come from? And so we can see that works from even a more material perspective, you could say. It certainly has a effect from a spiritual perspective. And so thank you for that point around association. And I'm glad that it resonated. So thank you. It's always great to see you on here. Yeah.
Thank you. Jai Nitai Prabhu, Bhava Bhakti, do you have any realizations on the subject of today's class? Please
Also,
share.
there was a question in the chat that from Venetia, I believe. I believe that's Srila Prabhupada, that quote, attention to details is a symptom of love. Correct me if I'm wrong, for anyone in the room, but I believe that was Srila Prabhupada that's mentioned that.
Thank you. Jai Nitai Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Hare Krishna,
Very
everyone.
well.
Wonderful class, Prabhu. First time I'm hearing the class, and very inspiring, and I really appreciated you encapsulating the 5 points at the end also, and highlighting all these very valuable points. I was thinking, God, you could spend hours on just one of those points, and you gave synopsises of all of them. And I think what stood out to me, you just mentioned, someone mentioned in the chat, I can't see the chat here, about love is in the attention to details. So I was thinking, yeah, how powerful that is, how much we pay attention to, and also you mentioned this with leadership, but with the attention to the details, that care really is about being able to be sensitive to the needs of someone else, to their situation, and being able to really imbibe and understand what will make them happy. Ultimately, that's how we please Krishna, by trying to please Krishna, not ourselves. So, but I really appreciated your class. So many wonderful points, and as one of the other devotees said, I can't remember if it was Jumuna Jai or Damodar Priya Devi, but that, yeah, it's very systematic the way you deliver it, but very shastric and very practical. So thank you, Anuj, for wonderful to hear your class. Very inspiring.
Thank you, Baruch. I look forward to meeting you as well in person.
Me too. Sorry I wasn't at the Kirtan on Thursday. Hoping to be there next week.
Of course, look forward to it. Very well. Thank you.
Jai. Bhava Bhakti, any word of wisdom?
She's too shy.
She's too shy. Okay, no, it's a virtue. It's a great virtue. Thank you, Bhava Bhakti.
Adi Purush for anything?
Hare Krishna. Wonderful class, very solid. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. And the subject matter being supported by the devotee association, and that the quality of leadership, what it should be like. And my own experience, praying to Srila Prabhupada, what to say here is that Krishna is so wonderful that he does provide that quality of caring personalities. All my life, Krishna's provided people for me to look up to and take shelter of. And we're not just moving into a list of rules or, an institution or a building, but we're actually moving into a relationship with a person. The classic temple president is there in the temple, and people move in there because they feel trust and inspiration that this person is worthy of my obedience, and isn't trying to take anything from me or make me into a feather in his cap. He's there for my benefit. And then Krishna explains that if we want that, if we really want someone there who's worthy of our trust and obedience, then Krishna will provide that quality of association. And it's so easy to slip into a less than, a more casual and a less than solid, sheltered type relationship with the leaders that Krishna provides. But they're there, and it's so wonderful. Okay, here comes Radha Muralidhar.
Is the mute off?
Yeah, we can hear everything nicely. Thank you.
Fantastic. You really did a good job there. Hari Purusham Namaha.
Thank you. Adipusha Prabhu. Shishi Radha Muralidhar Ki Jai. Shigur Chandra Ki Jai. Pujaris Ki Jai. Temple leadership Ki Jai. Yeah, leadership means shelter. Ashraya, right, Anuj Prabhu?
Very
Ashraya.
true.
Ashraya,
Big
shelter.
component of it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing out that subject. It always resonates nicely with the devotees because we're all looking to take shelter of somebody who's worthy of our trust, of our obedience.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any final instructions for us, Anuj Prabhu?
No, that's it. I mean, those are my thoughts and some of the points that I wanted to make from the verses, and look forward to getting into the next chapter, also section of Bhagavatam. But any other thoughts from anyone else in the room? And Michelle, thank you for sharing in chat your thoughts, driving over to work and from this week. Appreciate that. Any questions or anything I can clarify for anyone from my side?
No, it was crystal clear, Prabhu. Wonderful class, as always. Very structured, like everybody says, and Shastric. Thank you. Okay, Bhakti Corporation Ki Jai. Our corporate coach Anuj Prabhu Ki Jai. We like your shirt. It's like a power tie, red. Yeah, this is the leadership person. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you everyone for participating, for allowing us to see you and get purified, and hear you and get purified. Yes, we get purified by hearing, by seeing, by being seen by the Lord. Yeah, it works both ways. Thank you. Hare Krishna. I love you all. Hari Hari Bol.